this stupid claim, this fake claim.
I can tell you what the Voice will not be giving advice on. It won't be giving advice on parking tickets. It won't be giving advice on changing Australia Day.
Order.
Like so much that she now says, I mean, I tell you what, Linda Burney is just making stuff up. Experts say, well, hang on, there's nothing at all to stop the Voice actually telling the government to change Australia Day, which is wrong. And one of the designers of the Voice, Thomas Mayo, of the government's own referendum working group that designed the damn thing, says he's keen to use the Voice to scrap all things colonial, plus grab reparations as well. And what's more, the Yes 23 campaign director, Dean Parkin, they're for the Voice, arguing for the Voice, last year said, indeed, it's going to be used to try to change Australia Day.
And the constitutionally guaranteed voice is going to be the mechanism that allows us a seat at the table to ensure that these conversations around truth, be it on the 26th, be it on any other issue that's affecting our people, that we have a real say.
And today I also saw something I've been so happy to be able to ignore for the last 7 weeks. Indigenous Australians Minister Burney, so clueless now that she has to read word for word prepared answers in question time. Today giving a scripted non-answer when asked whether she'd actually misled Parliament with that claim, oh no, can't advise on Australia Day. And she had misled it, hadn't she?
Did the Minister mislead the Parliament when she said, and I quote, "I can tell you what the Voice won't be giving advice on. It won't be giving advice on changing Australia Day." End of quote.
It is not the policy of this government to change the date of Australia Day. The Voice may give advice, but the Parliament retains its primacy.
What if the Voice says, after dealing with health and education and the justice system, what if 12 months down the track, the Voice says, we want to change the date of Australia Day? What do you say as Prime Minister?
What we say is that we have no plans to change Australia Day.
You'll say no?
We say we have no plans, absolutely. And what's made
clear,
But you'll
say to the Voice no?
Of course we will. If we don't agree with them, of course we will.
Yeah, but whether the no pamphlet has reproduced it or not, well, that's up to them. Teela Reid says abolish Australia Day. Trying to limit the scope of what people can advocate to change is just stupid. We need to get back to the radical roots of the Communist Party. So
some people don't.
This does support.
It's going to be very difficult once we succeed for a government to ignore this voice. It will be powerful when the people of Australia mandate that this First Nations voice must exist beyond the political cycles, because that's the goal here, is to set up a mechanism that actually exists despite the government of the day, and that's mandated by the people. So it is going to be, this is why we've had the fight for years, because they know how powerful this will be, and that's why we're asking you to walk with us. We need the 97% to apply that political pressure.
It's Friday, gotta get down on Friday. Everybody's looking forward to the weekend. Friday, getting down on Friday. Everybody's looking forward to the weekend. Partying. Fun. Looking forward to the weekend. We're driving on the highway, cruising so fast, I want time to slap. Fun, think about fun. You know what it is. I got this, you got this. My friend is by my right. Hey, I got this, you got this. Now you know it. Kicking in the front seat, sitting in the back seat. Gotta make my mind up. Which seat can I take?
Minister for Indigenous Australians Linda Burney insists Parliament will still have the power to determine when Australia Day is held, even if the Voice to Parliament demanded a change of date.
The Minister for Indigenous Australians under fire for saying the Voice to Parliament wouldn't give advice on changing the date of Australia Day. Legal experts and Aboriginal leaders argue that's exactly the sort of issue the Voice would weigh into.
Did the Minister mislead the Parliament when she said, and I quote, I can tell you what the Voice won't be giving advice on. It won't be giving advice on changing Australia Day.
The opposition questioning Linda Burney on what constitutionally enshrined powers the Voice would have.
Would the Voice have the power to advise the government to abolish Australia Day?
It will not be involved in culture wars.
The government says the Voice's remit is on issues which affect Indigenous Australians differently than non-Indigenous Australians. Some activists argue assuming Australia Day doesn't impact those groups differently is insensitive.
I think that what the Minister has come out with is clearly an indication of how powerless this Voice really is.
The Prime Minister argues the Voice is the best option available.
The Voice will give us the best practical means that we have ever had to close the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians.
Joel Phillips, Sky News, Canberra.
You must have noticed how she has struggled in Parliament to explain how this Voice is actually going to work or fix anything. Yesterday she claimed it would not even advise on changing Australia Day. Today she said, oh, well, it would not fight culture wars. You know, she's backing off without saying she was wrong. What do you think this Voice will actually do?
This is really interesting. She put her dainty little foot right in it. That inner city Aboriginal activist put her foot right in it. Look, we in the No case know that about 80% of Australians are really sensitive to any move to change Australia Day, and I reckon the government knows that too. So she's tried to rule it out, that the Voice could not change Australia Day. Well, of course they want to lobby on that. It says that this Voice will advise government on any matters that affect Aboriginal people. Well, Aboriginal people are a modern people. Everything affects them. And since 1988, some of them have been campaigning against Australia Day, which, by the way, was a date set in 1948 in the Citizenship Act, which made us Australian citizens as opposed to British subjects. So it was a moment of unity, just like the 1967 referendum. This referendum divides us, and she's been caught out trying to cover it up.
Yeah, I think it's so ridiculous. It's so transparent, Gary. We have on one side Labor politicians like the Prime Minister, like Linda Burney, say, oh, this Voice is just a modest change, just modest, don't worry about it. It won't get political. It's just going to stick to issues that directly affect the Aborigines, even though the legislation doesn't say that. On the other, we get the activists appointed by the government to actually design the Voice, saying, well, in fact, we can do things like destroy colonial institutions, argue for Australia Day to be changed. We can advise everyone from the Reserve Bank to Centrelink and the Great Barrier Marine Park Authority. We can do anything. Who do we believe then? Labor or its Aboriginal advisors?
Well, the Aboriginal advisors. I mean, they're the ones who stood behind the Prime Minister Albanese when he wept over the words that he was forced to make part of the referendum. And remember, Professor Megan Davis said, you won't be able to shut this Voice up. She is on record of saying that, and she also said it will advise on everything to do with government. So if I were backing someone, I'd back the 21 advisors, the working party that stood behind the Prime Minister, in fact, rolled the Australian Prime Minister and the Australian Cabinet, your government, to get the words they wanted, the power they want to express through the Constitution. So I'd be listening to Megan Davis and others like that.
Well, they're going to be using the Voice, so I don't know whether the Prime Minister's word can be taken at all. Gary Johns, thank you so much indeed for fighting the good fight.
And now, Ben Fordham comments. When flying for business with Virgin Australia, you earn points fast, so your work trips can earn you a holiday even sooner. T's and C's apply.
Now, I'm prepared to have a little bet with Linda Burney. The Minister for Indigenous Australians has made a claim about the Voice. She reckons the Voice won't want to change the date of Australia Day. I'm happy to put $50 on it. It'll be the easiest money I've ever made. You know what? If I win, Linda doesn't even have to pay up. But I will pay up if I'm wrong. And I'm happy to contribute $50 to a charity of her choice if she wants to take up the bet. The minister seems to fail to understand how the Voice will work. The Voice is meant to be independent of politics, and they can ask for whatever they want. But Linda Burney reckons they won't want to change the date of Australia Day.
I can tell you what the Voice will not be giving advice on. It won't be giving advice on parking tickets. It won't be giving advice on changing Australia Day.
Order, members on my left.
It will not be giving advice on all of the ridiculous things that this side has come up with.
Well, I agree with her about parking tickets. I still don't know where that idea even came from, but she's dead wrong about Australia.
Remit, so what this body will and won't be able to do. So, for example, in question time yesterday, they asked whether the Voice Advisory Body would be able to make representations to the Chief of the Defence Force, for example, to which Ms Burney replied this advisory body has more important matters to consult on, and, for example, they won't be offering advice on issues such as Australia Day and parking tickets. However, constitutional law expert George Williams, he has disputed this in claims to The Australian, providing fresh ammunition for the opposition.
I think Linda Burney is in real trouble here, and I think she needs to come into the parliament and correct the record. If you mislead the parliament, unintentionally perhaps, you need to step back into the chamber and correct the record, because it's clearly not the case, Pete, that the Voice would not be able to make representations about Australia Day.